Nikola Jokic, following his back-to-back MVP seasons, somehow manages to be even more impressive than he's already shown himself to be. He is now averaging basically a triple-double on unbelievable efficiency, and the Denver Nuggets are the first seed in the Western Conference. Right now, the possibility of Nikola Jokic winning 3 MVPs in a row seems really possible, and this is something that has not happened since Larry Bird did it himself in the 80s. So let's talk about Nikola Jokic's MVP case and the historic season that he is having. Before we get into today's video, I want to talk about our sponsor, Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best daily fantasy app out there. As someone who is fairly new to the space, what I appreciate about Prize Picks the most is just how accessible it is to somebody like me. It's very simple. You look at the player's projected stats and you pick whether you think they will get more or less of what was projected. It is you versus the projections rather than you versus other players. You choose 2 to 5 players to take the over or under on, and depending on what amount you win, you can get paid out certain amounts if you choose a flex play, or you can choose to have to get all of them correct to get a maximum payout. And right now, Prize Picks is doing a free square for Joe Burrow going into the playoffs this weekend, so make sure you check that out. It's literally free money, and if you win, and you have no consequences if you lose. And me personally, though I don't know much about the NFL, I would take the over if I were you. On top of the NBA and the NFL, as previously mentioned, the app has MLB, NHL, esports, NASCAR, really anything you can think of. The list goes on and on. And what's great for you if you haven't downloaded Prize Picks already is that first-time users that use my code RUSTY will get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. So if you put in, let's say, 50, you would receive 50 back from Prize Picks and so on. So click the link in the description to download Prize Picks and use Rusty to get your deposit matched up to $100. Thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring this video. The first thing I want to do right out of the gate, just because it's the simplest thing, is really take a look at what Nikola Jokic's MVP numbers look like by comparison to what he is doing this season. If you look at Nikola Jokic's 2 MVP seasons, he averaged about 27 points, 12 rebounds, 8 assists, and about 1.2 stocks. And he did this with a 65% true shooting percentage. Now this year, Jokic is averaging 25 points and 11 rebounds, along with 9.9 assists, which is a career high. He is 0.1 assist away from averaging a 25-point triple-double, 2 stocks, and he has an unbelievable 70% true shooting percentage. For those of you who may not be aware, the average true shooting percentage in the league is somewhere around 57% last time I checked. It's somewhere in that ballpark. So Nikola Jokic, as someone who is looked at as basically the offensive hub of his team, and someone who's going to score 25 points a night, managing to put up those points while also shooting 13% better than league average is insane. What's even more insane is if you take a look at his 2-point percentage this year, because inside the 3-point arc, he is shooting 67% from the field. And given that only 2.3 of his shots are from outside of inside the 3-point line, aka behind the 3-point line, that means that Nikola Jokic is damn near shooting 70% on anything that's just not a 3. It's ridiculous. It's actually ridiculous. The level of efficiency in which Nikola Jokic is playing is off of the charts, and I would personally argue that 25, 11, and 10 is better than the 27, 12, and 8 or whatever that he was averaging on, still great efficiency, but worse. And another thing that adds to his MVP case, and I would argue adds far more significantly than the numbers do, even if that's what I started with, the main argument you would make is if Nikola Jokic was MVP the last 2 years, while his team was not a top 3 seed in the conference. How do you deny him winning MVP when his team is the first seed in the Western Conference? Because the argument that the crowd of people that hates Nikola Jokic, which is more large than I think it has any right to be, but whatever, that particular group of people, their argument was always his team's not winning enough. His team doesn't have a good enough record. They didn't even win 50 wins. How does he win MVP, you know? But at the same time, you can't make that argument now, so what's left? Can't really say his stats. The weird argument they made in the past was that he was just like an advanced stats guy, which is ludicrous because I just said a second ago that in his MVP years, he was averaging 27, 12, and 8 on 65% true shooting. So that's filling the box score and it's doing it efficiently. But even if you wanted to make that argument, then you sure as hell are not going to contend with a 25-point triple-double. So then you just have to look at, if Jokic's case is as strong as it is, the only way that he doesn't win MVP is really two factors. One, there is a legitimate case that's better than his, and that's not out of the realm of possibility. The MVP race is definitely still very much up for grabs. But the other one is voter fatigue, and that's kind of what I've been saying about this entire ordeal, the idea of Jokic winning 3 MVPs from the very beginning. Because while me personally, I don't think that, I don't think Jokic shouldn't win MVP because he won it over the last 2 years. I also understand that the way that fans work, the way that media works, there is such thing as voter fatigue. It's the same reason that Karl Malone has 2 MVPs when he should have 0 because he should have never been in the league. But the 1 in 99 is the only one that he should have had. 1998 should have gone to Michael Jordan, but voter fatigue is what it is. And the reason especially that people seem to want to deny Jokic this MVP is because winning 3 MVPs in a row has only been done by 3 players previous to Jokic, if he does indeed do it. The 3 players to receive this achievement were Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell in the 60s, and Larry Bird did it in the 80s. Since then, though, no one has done it. Any player that won back-to-back MVPs would be denied a 3rd one, even, like as I previously mentioned, in years where it was potentially worthy of consideration, like Michael Jordan in 1998. So I do understand that voter fatigue is kind of just an inherent part of the nature of how these awards go, and that's part of the reason that a lot of people don't see that much value in the MVP award for a player's legacy. Another point that I could see that some people believe, even though I strongly disagree, is I know there's a very strong subsection of NBA fans that think that Nikola Jokic is fairly overrated. They're the same crowd of people that, as I mentioned, acted as though his box score was not ridiculously impressive. So they might feel as though really like he's gonna be the first player that we give 3 since Larry Bird, even though arguably Michael Jordan should have, LeBron probably should have at some point, something along those lines. Is it really that fair to give it to Nikola Jokic? I hate that line of thinking personally. I really think it is awful to deny players awards just based on the fact that in the past other players were denied the award, and that's an argument that I find to be far too common. So with that, moving past, not necessarily ignoring because it's always going to be a factor, moving past the voter fatigue aspect of it, let's just talk about every other player's MVP case briefly and why I believe that Nikola Jokic's case is just simply better. In Boston with Jason Tatum, he honestly probably has the strongest case that's not Jokic. Another one might actually be Luka Doncic as well. But overall, I definitely feel as though Jokic's numbers are more impressive than what both Tatum and Luka are doing. I would argue that Luka's are maybe a little bit more impressive, but I just give Jokic a little bit of that edge for the efficiency. Not suggesting that either Luka nor Tatum are not putting up ridiculous stats and not doing so on good to also ridiculous efficiency. But I just like Nikola Jokic's box score like 5% more, and that's like the most subjective thing in the world. What you view as a great box score can depend on the person. I think all 3 of them are amazing, but I think Jokic slightly edges out in that department, and his team's winning more games than I would argue the Dallas Mavericks roster is actually not that much worse. It's worse built and worse structurally, but talent-wise, I actually think they're somewhat similar levels, and Nikola Jokic's team is the 1st seed, Luka's is the 5th. And with the Celtics, of course, they are the 1st seed in the Eastern Conference, and they have 2 more wins than the Denver Nuggets do. But really, I don't think that difference is significant enough, and if we're going to make a help argument, I definitely think if we're looking at these 3 as the top 3 candidates, Jason Tatum has the most help around him. We also, of course, have to give mention to Giannis. However, me personally, I think Giannis is having a down year, which is not something we've seen him do ever, really. He just improves every year, but this year he finally really isn't, and the Bucks have been struggling quite a bit lately, so I don't really know if he has the strongest case right now. It's got weak footing. Philadelphia is doing well, but as of right now, I think Joel Embiid has missed a little bit too much time to really be in consideration, but as the year progresses, he could find himself more and more in that conversation, assuming that he manages to maintain his health. Kevin Durant and Brooklyn probably going to be the same thing. He's just now starting rehab for an injury that kept him out for a month, or will keep him out for a month, so I think that's going to prevent him from winning it. Don't really think Ja is gonna do it, and I don't really think Zion's gonna do it. So at that point, it's really feeling like it's gonna come down to the original 3 that I mentioned, Luka, Tatum, and Jokic, and from there it's gonna come down to pretty much anybody's personal preference. I just hope and pray that when it comes to award season, when the voting is going through, that the media and the people responsible for voting aren't giving the thought, well, I can't pick Jokic for the 3rd year in a row. Because if Jokic has the best case for MVP this year, the 2 years that happened before it have nothing to do with it. The 2 years that happened before it are irrelevant. How did he perform this year? Did he perform like an MVP this year? Did he perform like the player that deserves MVP this year? If so, you give it to him. No question. Unfortunately, though, if I had to predict, I would say they might take that away from him. But Jokic is one of the most absurd offensive players I've ever seen. Some people would argue Jokic is not the quality of talent to deserve 3 consecutive MVPs, but I could not disagree more. I think Jokic, by the time he is done playing this game, is going to retire as, at the bare minimum, one of the 25 best to have ever done this, and probably one of the 5 best offensive players, period, in the history of the sport. And the MVPs that he's been winning has only been a reflection of the incredible talent that he has. Anyways, that all said, is Jokic going to win 3 consecutive MVPs? I don't know. It'd be really cool. I'm kind of rooting for it, but also I did make the prediction that Tatum would win it, so I'm kind of also wanting that to happen. All I know is if by the end of the year, Jokic really feels like he has the best case and he doesn't win it, I'm going to be a little bit annoyed. That said, well, that's it. That's the end of the video. Shout out to PrizePicks for sponsoring, shout out to Rudy for editing the video, and goodbye.